I was living in Springfield, Oregon at the time, had just started my freshman year in high school. Super stoked to be taking all these different electives and classes. So I was in the arts, I was in the theater, but also was pretty good at math. So I was placed in an advanced math class my freshman year. So I was in class with a lot of older students, juniors, seniors, and it was in that math class where I met my rapist. His name was Rick. And really, he just started kind of passing notes to me, trying to get my attention. And I had never really had, gotten much attention from guys. I didn't know how to really deal with boys liking me. Since I was one of the I really was always the new girl in school or the minority in the classes where I grew up. So I wasn't used to the attention. And he started giving me a lot of attention and asked for my number. So we talked on the phone secretly for about a week. And it was during those conversations where started to become somewhat clear to me that he was attracted to me and that he wanted to have some type of sexual relationship with me. But I was very clear with him on the phone that I was saving myself for marriage. And I brushed it off. And there was one day at school, I spent I want to say it was my study hall in the music department. There was a large choir room there. I just remember being in that large choir room. And at some point earlier in the day, I had seen him on campus, and he asked me to meet him during class. And naturally my instinct was, no, I can't. And he's like, well, just meet me. I'll just come meet me at this time. So I, asked to go to the bathroom or something, and I went and met him out in the hallway, and he pulled me into a private practice room at the school in the music department. They had these small private practice rooms with either a piano or an organ, and he took me into the room. It was very dark, and so we were in the room, and he's a very tall guy in stature, about 6'4", very big, kind of stocky, muscular guy, and he wanted me to have oral sex, give him oral sex, and I didn't want to do that. I was scared. But he was just being very aggressive and insistent, and I started saying no at that point. But I didn't really know what was happening, or I was just scared. And so at one point, he turned me around and bent me over the organ and was trying to take my clothes off, and then he forced me to lay on the ground, and that was it. Before I knew it, I don't know. I guess in my mind I escaped, or I kind of, blacked out mentally what was happening at the time, and he stopped, and he just told me to shut up and that I better not say anything to anyone, and called me a bad word and got up and left the room. And I remember going to the bathroom, and I remember seeing blood on my underwear, and then I just went back to class. So I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I really was kind of feeling guilty or ashamed that I had lost my virginity, and I talked to my best friend at the time and told her what happened, and it was a couple of months that had gone by, and I had during that time tried to speak to him once. I remember at school in the hallway, and it was like he looked right through me, like I didn't even exist. So so I missed my period twice, and my best friend was like, Crystal, we really gotta go. We really gotta find out if you're pregnant, what's going on. And I really was in denial about it, so I didn't want to go. But my best friend insisted that we go to Planned Parenthood, and so we skipped school one afternoon and went down there on the bus, and she went with me, and they had me in a kind of a small counseling room, and told me that I was pregnant. And my reaction was pretty stale. I mean, I was just in shock. My best friend was actually bawling in tears, crying more than I was, as I just couldn't believe that this had happened. So they just gave me some information on abortion and told me that all I needed was like $300, and I didn't need my parents' permission. I just needed to make an appointment. So I did. Finding out I was pregnant was absolutely a turning point in my life. I definitely wanted a family and to have kids. But I wanted to be able to come into my home proudly and tell my family that I was going to have a baby, not like this. So, no, I thought about how much I had fantasized about having a family and having a baby, and I thought about that a lot. But I just knew that I couldn't really tell my parents, and if this came out, that they would look at me completely different, or I didn't want to be a teen mom either. I was scared of that. So it was pretty scary finding out I was pregnant, and I didn't even really have the mental capacity to think about the assault, because I was worried about what to do with the situation. It changed me forever. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to go through in my life. And from then on, it would cause a really deep, gaping wound in my spirit for a long time. The grief was hard to deal with. I reached out to my brother, who was really concerned and always very protective, and he just wanted to help me. He would have done anything I'd asked him. At that point, I asked him for the money so that I could go through with this. And so I made the appointment, and I forged a fake note to get out of school without having the school call my home and reporting me truant. I didn't want anyone to know that I had missed half a day of school. So my plan was just to go down there, take care of it, and go home. I'd gone to the nurse's office to be excused from school with my note, and she could see the strain in my eyes and my energy, my body, my posture, everything, I think. Because she pressed me, insisted that I open up to her, and ultimately I ended up cracking and telling her that I was pregnant, that I had an appointment for an abortion, and I really had to go because if I didn't go, I was going to get in a lot of trouble, and I just needed to take care of it. And so she asked me, the school nurse asked me if I thought that my parents would want to know that I was about to do this. And I said, yeah. And she asked me if I thought that if I told my mom that she would want to help me and be understanding. And I said, yeah. So she convinced me to let her call my mom. So my mom left work and came down to the school, and we sat in the counseling office, and the counselor told my mom that I was pregnant. And I didn't really have words to say. We were kind of afraid to tell my dad because we weren't sure what his reaction would be. But we knew he'd be upset, so we asked, my mother asked our pastor to come to meet us at the house so that we could essentially sit him down and break the news. So yeah, I never made it to that appointment. Yeah, we sat down in the living room and with the pastor there to kind of mediate. My mom told, or maybe my pastor told my dad that I was pregnant and somewhat explained the situation to him, but I didn't have words to say at that time. I know I felt a lot of shame about what had happened, and I knew that I would disappoint my dad, and all I ever wanted to do was make him proud of me. So I may have mentioned what happened, but I wasn't able to talk much about it at that time. So my parents took me to a child advocacy center, which is basically a children's version of the police station, and I sat down with a detective there and did an interview and told them what had happened. So at the time, I believe my parents were informed of the situation. I don't think that I truly had gotten to a place where I had acknowledged that it was rape at that point. I think it took me many years before I stopped, or at least started to stop blaming myself for what had happened. After I told both my parents, then we went back and forth quite a bit in the home about what to do. And at that point, I started to kind of feel as though this decision wasn't up to me. I did have opinions about what I wanted to do. I just practically and logistically couldn't figure out how it would work because um, my parents insisted that it was going to be too much of a strain on the family, and where would we keep a baby, and my father was pretty adamant that the baby would not come home into our house. So there was a lot of fighting. It was traumatic for me at that time. I had a desire to keep my baby, and I expressed that, but I had no way of making it work at that time. I was only 14, so I couldn't get a job. I don't know even if I'd been able to get into the community college and get a GED or anything. I wasn't sure how that was going to work, being so young. I would definitely need help and support. And so, because the fighting got so bad, I just wanted it to stop, and I didn't want my family to be torn apart. So I agreed, mostly to appease my dad. I agreed to do the abortion a second time, and we made an appointment. So so we were on our way to the appointment for the abortion, and I was in the back seat, and my parents were in the front. My dad was driving, and I sat in the back on the way there, hearing God speak to me. I was really scared, and I knew then that I didn't want to do it, but I wasn't sure how I would get through this. So, I sat in the back seat just talking to God, really, and just heard God say to me to take his hand, to trust him, and that her blood was innocent. So I chose to trust God in that moment. And I told my dad to stop the car. And we pulled over into a grocery store parking lot. And I told my parents that I didn't know what I was going to do, but that I would be having this baby. So instead of going to an abortion appointment that day, I told the gynecologist that we're having a baby. I was about 3 months pregnant at the time. I decided I was going to go through with giving birth to my daughter, and I took some time to explore my options with a pregnancy counselor, an options counselor there that actually worked for an adoption agency. So her job was to also make sure that that's really what I wanted to do and walk me through my options with adoption, whether it was a closed adoption or an open adoption. And also, she extensively walked me through the choice to parent my child. And, we outlined everything on legal pads. I did all the math and came up with, I don't know, pros and cons and whether I was going to take care of my baby in some way, be a parent, or place my daughter in an adoption. And adoption sounded like the best option for me as long as I could still have a relationship with her and know and be able to tell my daughter that I love her. So I chose an open adoption, and the adoption agency had a pool of adoptive parents to choose from. So I literally was flipping through a book of all these excited parents that, wannabe parents that were ready to take home a child and take it in and raise it. And my first round of looking through the adoptive pool, I didn't see anyone that sticked out to me. There was a few things that I was looking for. I knew I wanted my baby to grow up in a two-parent home, a Christian family that was stable, that wasn't going to move around a lot, that had a nice house, and she would grow up healthy and happy. So that's what I looked for. And so I didn't find it my first time around, but I got a call from my counselor saying that a new adoptive couple had just re-entered the pool. And they told me they'd re-entered the pool to have a second child. They had a first that they'd adopted a little boy who was 3. And they were hoping for a girl to complete their family. So I was having a girl. And they seemed really sweet. And they'd been married a very long time and had tried to get pregnant for like 7 years. So I met with them at the adoption office, and we just got to know each other. And then it seemed like it was going to start to move forward. So it was kind of like we courted a little bit, we sort of dated a little. We went to hang out, we went to eat, I stayed at their house, and even my daughter's adoptive mom and I went to the library, picked out baby name books, and one day we sat down and worked out what my daughter's name would be together. So that was pretty cool. That was 9 months of ups and downs, and actually toward the end of the school year, I was showing and started getting a lot of stares from the kids at school. And I was kind of embarrassed because I felt that maybe people were looking at me as though I was a slut or just another teen mom. And so always worried kind of what people were thinking of me. So I was really kind of happy when the summer came and I was able to spend my last trimester sort of at home, just waiting. So actually my parents took really good care of me that summer, and I just remember having cravings for plums. I wanted to eat a lot of plums. So, my dad and I, we weren't talking much, but he would bring me what I needed and make sure I was okay. So, yeah, I was overdue and scheduled for an induction. So when I went to the hospital, my daughter was getting an eviction notice, and that hit me like a ton of bricks. And I tried for a really long time to bear down, but that little girl didn't want to go anywhere. She was content right where she was. So ultimately I ended up trying to push for like 2.5 hours. They tried every instrument they could, but I needed to have a C-section. So my mom was there with me, and my daughter's adoptive mother was also there with me. And when the doctors told us that I needed an emergency C-section, they were prepping the operating room. It was then that my mom called my dad and told him, and he did end up coming down to the hospital. And we had a baby that day. So, yeah, my mom and my daughter's adoptive mom were in the operating room with me together. And I remember shivering a lot. It was scary and the medicine, but yeah. Um, she was 9 pounds, 1.5 ounces, and a head full of jet black hair and eyes like ebony. And that's actually what I wanted to name her at that point. Like, if I could have, I'd have just changed her name to Ebony at that point. But yeah, so we spent 2.5 days in the hospital together. And I got to breastfeed her, which I ended up paying for later because I was in a lot of pain afterwards. But those are moments that I'll cherish the rest of my life. And I remember one time being in the hospital room, and maybe my mom had gone home or to handle something, but it was just me and my dad in the room with the baby, and I needed to use the bathroom. And so I insisted that he hold her, and he didn't want to, but Dad, just hold her. And when I came out of the bathroom, he was there feeding her the bottle, and I'll never forget that moment. I cherished that moment for a really long time. But that's my baby. That's my heart, my soul, my why, my motivation. Just knowing that she's here, she's looking up to me, has gotten me through some really dark moments in my life. Not wanting to disappoint her or hurt her or leave her. So she saved me, really. So we created a visitation agreement so that I kind of knew when I'd be able to visit with her. We planned to do several visits the first year, as she was just a newborn, and I kind of had my attachment to her. And then about a year, or one visit every year after that. So I visited her about every year after that and got lots of pictures in the mail and was able to send her gifts and talk on the phone. So yeah, I've seen my daughter every year since she was born and been able to hug her and tell her I love her myself. And our relationship's had its ups and downs just in terms of being able to really emotionally bond and connect with each other. I found that after every visit, it was really difficult for me to again leave. So I sort of slipped into a cycle of emotional detachment during the times when we weren't visiting. I didn't call much or think on it too much because it was just painful. So there was a bit of an emotional disconnect for me just going through the grief and missing her. But I still made a point to make those visits as fun and meaningful and memorable as possible. And as she got older, and social media and everything, we've kept in touch a lot more. And it's just crazy to see how much she's like me, even though I didn't parent her, personality-wise, and she's super ambitious and bubbly and outgoing and, smart. She's a smart girl. So my daughter is actually studying right now for her graduate degree, her bachelor degree, and then she'll be going on to get her PhD. And she recently became a mom. So you know what that means. I'm a grandma. I'm a 30-something grandma. And my grandbaby is amazing. She's the most bubbly, juicy little precious thing, and she loves the camera. When the camera comes on, she's like, cheese. She's adorable. She's got the most beautiful green eyes. So it's pretty exciting being a grandma, even though I think I'm pretty cute young grandma, you know. I'm most proud of my daughter for not giving up, pursuing her dreams. She's been through her share of grief about our situation and kind of finding ourselves and dealing with being bullied growing up or body image issues. And so I'm really proud of her for just continuing to pursue her education despite getting pregnant somewhat young. She's 18 when she got pregnant. And I'm just proud of her for how beautiful and bright and smart she is. I mean, really, my daughter wouldn't have to achieve a single thing beyond what she's already done for me to be proud of her. She's the greatest gift to me in the world. I mean, really the bright light in the whole situation for me. Really, my daughter is my greatest accomplishment. So, oh, I love her to the end of the earth. She's God's gift to me. Truly a blessing. And yeah. It was kind of scary telling my daughter how she was conceived. We were riding in the car during one of our visits, and you know, she's a young girl. She's like 9. You know, she's learning. She's going through puberty. She's learning about sex and teen pregnancy and different things. And so, you know, she made a statement to me that, oh, you don't have to worry, Mom. Like, that will never happen to me. Like, I'm not going to mess with boys like that. And I felt like at that time it was just naturally kind of the right moment, a teaching moment for her to understand that, yes, we all have choices and we should make the best choice, and definitely, if it's possible, to save yourself for someone who's worth it, or save yourself for marriage. But then I also taught her that there's some times when some people don't have a choice, and that was the situation that I had been in, and that I didn't want to have sex, but I didn't have a choice. And so it was then that I shared with her. I don't think she fully understood, but she knew then that I made it a deliberate choice to have her in my life, and that I was glad she was here, and she's my angel baby. I chose to trust God, and the outcome is beyond what I could have ever imagined for myself at that time. And so, you know, trusting Him, walking in faith has been a huge part of my journey, and I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for my relationship with God, for my family standing by me, no matter how difficult that it was. And I know that not every girl feels as though they have that. I feel really strongly that most people who decide on abortion or have been in a situation where they feel really strongly about being pro-choice, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, because I've been there and I was in that situation, and I've counseled with post-abortive women, and there's one thing that's pretty consistent, is that they all feel as though they have no other choice. That to me is just so ironic. To be pro-choice, but the women who are in that situation really don't feel like there is a choice, whether it's, money or not having a support system in place. And so I feel really passionate about sharing my story because all I needed then was one person to say that they had my back or that I would get through it. I needed someone to stand for me. And so I feel like we'd have a lot less abortion in our country if we could just rally behind women, whether they're in an unplanned pregnancy or whether it wasn't their choice. Women are so much stronger than we realize or that the law gives them credit for. And to be in that situation, raped and pregnant, it almost felt like, well, why wouldn't you have an abortion? Like it was being shoved down my throat to the point where I almost couldn't make sense of the fact that I had this bond and attachment to my baby, my womb. Like, I feel her, she's there. I see her heartbeat. I hear her heartbeat. I just couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine taking her life now. I absolutely, not for a second, ever regretted my decision. When I do talk to women who are post-abortive, it's interesting how candid they are with me and how they open up to me. I think because they see that I understand how the gravity of that situation and what it's like to be forced into that situation or to unexpectedly be in it. And I've never felt like I was better than someone who chose abortion, but I encourage them to acknowledge the existence of that human life and honor their child, even if they did make that choice, that they can still ask for forgiveness and honor them, the existence of that human life. And so I've actually had the pleasure and the blessing and I'll call it an honor. It kind of felt like, a moment of responsibility to walk them through sort of a grieving process. Healing has been a long journey. And for a period of about 10 years after everything happened, I coped. I really was just numbing kind of that emptiness, that void that I was feeling. So I went away to college and I kind of poured myself into work and school, and it was there in college where I got into my first kind of codependent, toxic relationship. I numbed and coped a lot with food, with alcohol, and sex. That's kind of how I put a Band-Aid on feeling worthless. Was just those moments of feeling desired. So it took me a long time to really open up about what had happened, and I started kind of slipping into suicidal depression. When I was in my early 20s, I moved to Los Angeles to continue to pursue my career in entertainment, and I was working myself to the bone. I was going to school full-time, working full-time, and I experienced a burnout. And it was then that I started seeking help. And the first thing I did was I called the RAIN organization's 24-hour national hotline, and I spoke to an individual who was very kind and compassionate over the phone and started to open up about what I was feeling and the grief around my baby and the rape. So that was the first step, and then I sought some counseling. I did quite a bit of counseling for many, many years. And but I really started to see my healing journey turn around when I, by the grace of God, stumbled on a rape treatment center in Santa Monica near where I was living. And it turned out they offered a year of free counseling for women who had been victims of rape or sexual assault. So I had someone who was trained to work with me through a lot of those feelings and make sense of it. And it was then that I really started to explore forgiveness. And it started with forgiving myself for feeling as though my decisions had led to and caused all of the assault, the pain that my family went through, and the pain I was experiencing with my daughter, just that everything was my fault. And so I had to forgive myself, and that's been a process even now, working through this shame. I had to forgive Rick, and that was difficult. But honestly, I found it to be one of the easier things to forgive, only because although I was angry, am angry still, me holding on to that anger wasn't serving me at all. At that time, I was intuitive enough to know that, and that chances are if he had been, terrorizing people, that he had been through something terrible in his life. And so I gave it to God, and I chose to forgive him. And then, it took me many more years to kind of work through forgiving myself and forgiving my parents, my father. It was a long time that I felt, particularly right after the assault and right after giving up my daughter for adoption, I came home and kind of jumped right back into school, and we didn't really discuss it as a family. So I somewhat felt emotionally abandoned, and it was difficult to work through that. So it took me a long time to really get to a place where I could forgive my dad, and understand that, he had his own set of emotions he was dealing with too at the time. And so, kind of, again, looking at our humanity and understanding that he did the best he could, that's what helped me to forgive my dad. The greatest struggle for me was not feeling worthy, feeling ashamed, was the emptiness and the grief. There were countless nights that I cried myself to sleep. And it took me a long time to be able to look in the mirror and see myself the way God does, as someone who's powerful and beautiful and precious and strong. Because now I feel like I'm partners with God in creating this child, and she has a purpose. She wants to save lives, and I want to save lives and make a difference for people. So, me and God, we're a team. He's got my back. That's for sure. Yeah. So yeah, the most difficult thing is definitely going through the grief, the anger, the depression, and making sense of what happened to me. And the greatest blessing has been seeing my daughter smile and my whole family together and healed and loving each other and stronger for it, you know. And I get such a blessing from being able to minister to women who've gone through sexual assault, who've gone through rape. Um, and each moment that I share my story is a healing experience for me. And so I do it to heal and to be healed, really. And there's no greater feeling than feeling fulfilled and purposeful when I share my story, and it gives another woman the courage to share her truth. So that's why I open up the way that I do when I talk about this.